After paying for my house for 20 years, my daughter-in-law told me, "Starting tomorrow, you don't live here anymore." I had to go live as a favor, but a month later, I discovered that well, let me tell you, what I found out would make your blood run cold. But first, you need to understand how I got here. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 62 years old, and for 2 decades of my life, I worked as a janitor in offices in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. Every penny I earned had one destination: paying the mortgage on my house on Maple Street. The house I paid for 20 years. 20 years, folks. 20 years waking up at 5 in the morning, taking 2 buses to get to work, cleaning bathrooms for executives who made in 1 month what I made in a year. 20 years of back pain, hands dried out from so much cleaning product that smelled like bleach, even after 3 showers, working holidays while other families were together. But I had a dream. A house of my own. A place where my son David could grow up with dignity, where I could age in peace. And I made it. Except I didn't know that someone was planning to take it away from me. In 2003, I made the last payment. The house was mine, completely mine. Or at least I thought it was. Funny how we can be naive at 40, right? David grew up in that house. Graduated from high school, got a good job as an air conditioning technician. Work that pays well here in Arizona, believe me. When he married Brittany in 2019, a 28-year-old cosmetics saleswoman with a toothpaste commercial smile, I offered my house for them to live together, until I discovered what kind of person she really was. "Mom," David said, "are you sure? It's a big house, we all fit." And we did fit. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious living room. Perfect for a family. What I didn't know was that for Brittany, I was just a temporary obstacle. When the grandchildren arrived, Emma, now 7 years old, and Tyler, 4, I felt complete. Finally, my house was full of life, laughter, purpose. For 3 years, I thought we were a happy family. I took care of the children while David and Brittany worked. I cooked, cleaned, helped with homework. But Brittany was always a little distant with me. Comments about privacy, about how it would be nice to have our own space. You know the type, right? Those people who never say directly what they want, but keep planting little seeds of poison. But I thought it was just new daughter-in-law jealousy, you know? That with time she would get used to it. How wrong I was. It was on a Thursday in March. David had left for an installation job that would last all day. The children were at school. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch. The smell of sautéed onions was still in the air, when Brittany came in. She didn't have her usual expression, that forced smile she always used with me. This time, her face was cold, calculating. "Margaret," she said, and the tone already gave me chills. She never called me by name. It was always mother-in-law or Mrs. Thompson. "Yes, dear?" "Starting tomorrow, you don't live here anymore." The words fell like a hammer. I felt my stomach drop, my knees go weak. The floor seemed to move under my feet. "What do you mean, Brittany? This is my house." "Was your house," she corrected, with a coldness that cut me like ice. "David and I talked. We decided we need our space. You have until Sunday to pack your things." My mind was spinning. "But David agreed to this? Where am I going to live?" "That's not our problem, Margaret. You're an adult woman. You'll figure it out." Adult. As if at 62, after raising a son alone and paying for a house for 2 decades, I was a rebellious teenager who needed to learn to fend for herself. I tried calling David immediately, but Brittany had already anticipated it. When he answered, she was next to him, whispering. What I didn't realize was that she had spent weeks preparing the ground. "Mom," David said, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Brittany told me that you two talked about you, wanting more independence." "David, I never said that. She's lying." "Mom, please don't make this harder. Maybe it really is better this way. You'll have your freedom back." Freedom? I was being kicked out of the house I paid for 20 years, and they called it freedom? The weekend was a blur of humiliation. Brittany wouldn't let me take anything but clothes and some personal items. "The furniture is part of the house," she said. Furniture I bought, appliances I paid for, everything stayed. But she was being generous letting me take my clothes. My sister Rose, who lives in Tempe, took me into her 2-bedroom apartment, a tiny room that barely fit a single bed. At 62, I was living as a favor, depending on my younger sister's kindness. But I didn't know that was just the beginning of the nightmare. Because what Brittany was hiding was much worse than I ever imagined. In fact, what I would discover in 3 weeks would make all this seem like child's play. You know what it's like when you sleep in a bed that's not yours, in a room that smells like mothballs and despair? When you wake up not knowing, for a few confused seconds, where you are. That's how I lived for a whole month. And every morning, reality hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had lost the house I paid for 20 years. Rose did what she could. She's a good sister, always has been. But at 58, with arthritis in her hands and a small pension, she wasn't prepared to have a permanent guest. I could see the stress on her face, the way she sighed when she thought I wasn't looking. "Margaret," she said one morning, while we were having coffee at her table that was too small for 2 people. "Have you thought about looking for a senior apartment? There are some government programs." Senior apartment. Government programs. I, who worked my whole life, who paid taxes religiously, who raised a decent son, was now a needy elderly person. Funny how life can turn upside down in a 5-minute conversation. The worst part was the silence. My house on Maple Street was always full of life. Emma running through the hallways, Tyler watching cartoons on TV, the sound of the washing machine, the smell of cookies in the oven. Now, in Rose's apartment, the silence was deafening. Just the tick-tock of the kitchen clock and the hum of the old air conditioner. And my thoughts. Dark thoughts that visited me at 3 in the morning. Was I really a burden? Is David better off without me? I tried to keep in touch with the grandchildren, but Brittany controlled everything. When I called, she answered with that sweet, fake voice. "Oh, Margaret, the children are busy right now. Maybe later?" Later never came. And with each polite no, I felt a piece of me die. David visited me twice that month, twice in 4 weeks. He seemed uncomfortable, like he was fulfilling a social obligation, visiting the elderly relative in the nursing home. Except I wasn't in a nursing home. Yet. He talked about work, about how the children were adapting well to the new routine. He never mentioned when I could see them. What I didn't know was that Brittany had forbidden any talk about my return. "Mom," he said on the second visit, "you look different, thinner." Of course I was thinner. I could barely eat. Food had no taste. Nothing had taste. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. My hair started falling out. Rose found me crying in the bathroom more times than I can count. "I'm fine, son," I lied. "Just adapting." He nodded, clearly relieved not to have to go deeper into the subject. "Brittany said you're enjoying your new freedom." Freedom. That word again. As if being kicked out of your own house was a birthday present. At night, I lay awake in the tiny room, looking at the cracked ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong. Depression was swallowing me like quicksand. Each day was harder than the last. During the day, I walked around Rose's apartment complex, watching other people living their lives. Young mothers taking children to school, retirees watering tiny gardens. Everyone seemed to have a place in the world, except me. 3 weeks passed like this. 3 weeks of depression, questioning, sleepless nights. I was starting to accept that maybe this was my new reality. Maybe I would have to find a cheap apartment, live on Social Security, accept that my days of being useful were over. 3 weeks passed, until something strange happened. Something that made me realize that maybe I wasn't the crazy one in this story. What I was about to discover would change everything. And it would start with something as simple as trying to see photos of my grandchildren on Facebook. You know what it's like when you don't understand much about technology, but you try anyway? Well, that was me with the cell phone David gave me last Christmas. A used iPhone. But for me, it was like a spaceship. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Rose had gone out for her weekly medical appointments. Arthritis, high blood pressure, the usual list of problems for people in their 60s. I was alone in the apartment, feeling useless, when I decided to try to see photos of my grandchildren on Facebook. Little did I know that this decision would change everything. David had helped me create an account months ago, but I rarely used it. Technology and I aren't exactly best friends, but the longing was killing me. I needed to see Emma and Tyler's faces, even if it was through a screen. I started clicking on everything, literally everything. I didn't know what did what. I clicked on people you may know, on ads, on random videos. The phone was suggesting a bunch of things I didn't understand. Apparently, Facebook's algorithm thought I needed cake recipes and knitting groups. And then, among the friend suggestions, a profile appeared that made me stop breathing. Julia Santos, Tucson, Arizona. Santos. Wasn't that Brittany's maiden name? Confused, I clicked on the photo. What I saw shocked me. It was a girl about 16 years old. Long brown hair, green eyes, wide smile. Pretty, the type who's popular in school. But that wasn't what shocked me. It was her face. Folks, this girl was identical to Brittany. Not similar, identical. Like it was Brittany at 16. The same face shape, the same small nose, even the same dimple on her chin. My heart started beating faster. My hands started shaking. I clicked on her profile, trying to see more photos. Most were private, but some were public. And what I found made me even more confused. In one of them, Julia was with a man about 40 years old, dark-haired, hugging in front of a house. The caption said, "Miss Daddy." In another photo, older, there was a complete family. The same man, Julia, a teenage boy, and a woman with her back turned, with brown hair just like Brittany's. The caption, "Santos family, Dad's birthday, 2022. Last year. Brittany had been married to David since 2019, so how could she be in a family photo with other people? My mind was racing. Who was this girl? Why did she have the last name Santos if Brittany was Thompson now? And why the hell did she look so much like my daughter-in-law? Unless, I tried to see more photos, but my trembling fingers clicked on something wrong and the profile disappeared. I tried searching again, but couldn't find it. It was like Julia Santos had evaporated. Apparently, Facebook decided I didn't need to see that anymore. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to find that profile again. Nothing. I started wondering if I had imagined it all. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe depression was making me see things. But I knew what I had seen. And that image of the girl wouldn't leave my head. When Rose got home, I was agitated. "Rose, can you help me with something on Facebook?" "Margaret, you know I understand less about computers than you do. But you have eyes. I want you to see a photo." We tried for an hour to find Julia Santos's profile again. Nothing. It was like she had never existed. "Maybe you saw wrong," Rose said gently. "Sometimes these social networks show random people." But I hadn't seen wrong. I knew I hadn't. That night, lying in the tiny bed, I couldn't stop thinking. Who was Julia Santos? Why did she look so much like Brittany? And why had Facebook's algorithm shown her to me? Unless there was a connection I wasn't seeing. Sometimes the universe gives us signs, folks. Small clues that seem like coincidences, but aren't. That photo of Julia Santos was my first sign that something was very, very wrong. What I didn't know was that my gossipy neighbor had found much more concrete evidence. And what she discovered would make that photo seem like just the tip of the iceberg. You know that type of neighbor who knows everything that happens on the street? Who's always at the window, always paying attention? Well, that was Dolores Martinez, my 70-year-old neighbor on Maple Street. And thank God for neighbors like her. Sometimes you need a professional gossip to discover the truth. Dolores always suspected Brittany. From the first day my daughter-in-law set foot on our street, Dolores told me, "Margaret, that girl has the face of someone who's hiding something. I know the type." At the time, I thought it was just old neighbor jealousy. Dolores never married, never had children, and sometimes seemed resentful of happy families. But now I was starting to think she was right. 70 years of life experience teaches you to recognize liars. When I disappeared from Maple Street, Dolores got curious. She saw me packing on that humiliating Sunday, saw David carrying my things to the car looking like a lost dog. But Brittany didn't give explanations to anyone. Suspicious, right? Margaret decided to move, was all she told neighbors who asked. She wanted more independence. Dolores didn't buy that story for a second. 70 years living in this world, she told me later, and I've never seen a 62-year-old woman want independence by leaving her own house to live as a favor with her sister. That's like saying someone chose to jump off a building. So Dolores did what every good gossipy neighbor does. She decided to investigate. And thank God she did. In the first week after I left, she started paying more attention to my house, and soon noticed something strange. Brittany was burning papers in the backyard, not 1 or 2 sheets, piles of documents. Who burns paper in March in Arizona? Dolores thought. It's not fireplace season. And who burns documents unless they're hiding something? In the second week, Dolores saw something even more suspicious. Brittany received a visit from a man in a suit with a briefcase. They talked on the porch for almost an hour, and Brittany seemed nervous, constantly looking around like a cornered animal. Lawyer, Dolores concluded, or real estate agent. Either way, it wasn't good news. But it was in the third week that Dolores decided to act. She saw Brittany burning more papers, and this time waited until my daughter-in-law went inside to investigate. Dolores pretended to be lost and went to my house, pretending to look for an address. "Excuse me, dear," she said to Brittany. "I'm looking for the Johnson house. Do you know where it is?" While Brittany gave confused directions, the Johnsons had lived on the street for 15 years. Everyone knew where it was. Dolores observed the backyard. There were ashes scattered near the grill, and some pieces of paper that hadn't burned completely. Bingo. "Thank you, dear," Dolores said, and left. But she came back. At night, when the house was dark, Dolores came back and searched through the trash. Folks, I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes you need a crazy person to discover the truth, and Dolores was the right crazy person for the job. Among the ashes and trash, Dolores found pieces of charred paper. Most were illegible, but some fragments could still be read. A piece of a marriage certificate with the name Brittany Santos and a date of 2015, 4 years before she married David. Part of an alimony receipt with the name Marcelo Santos as the payer. And the most shocking, a piece of a handwritten letter in a child's handwriting. "Miss Mommy, when are you coming back? Kisses, Julia, Julia." The same name as the girl I had seen on Facebook. Now the pieces were starting to fit together. Dolores kept all the fragments in an envelope and called me. "Margaret, you need to come here. Now." Rose took me to Dolores's house that same night. When I saw the pieces of paper, I felt my world collapse again. But this time, it wasn't despair. It was anger. "Dolores," I said, "are you sure this came from my house?" "Absolutely. I saw her burning it with my own eyes." Brittany Santos, married in 2015, alimony. A letter from a child named Julia. The pieces were starting to fit together, and the puzzle that was forming was terrible. "Margaret," Dolores said, holding my hand, "that girl is hiding something big, and I think it has to do with why she got you out of your own house." She was right. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a paranoid mother-in-law. There was something very wrong with Brittany. But the truth was even worse than I imagined. What I was about to discover through the mouth of an innocent child would make all this seem like just the beginning. Because sometimes it's children who tell the truths that adults try to hide. You know how children are too honest for their own good? How they tell things that adults would prefer to keep secret? Well, that's exactly what happened with my little grandson, Tyler. Sometimes you need a 4-year-old detective to discover the truth. After 3 weeks without seeing the grandchildren, I begged David to let me visit them. Just 1 hour, just to make sure they were okay. "Mom," David said, clearly uncomfortable. "Brittany thinks it might be confusing for the children. They're adapting to the new routine." "David, they're my grandchildren. 1 hour, please." Maybe it was the pain in my voice, or maybe he was feeling guilty, but David finally agreed. 1 hour, Saturday morning, and Brittany will be present. Of course she would. Like she was going to leave me alone with the children to tell the truth. When I arrived at my former house, and it hurt to call it former, Brittany received me with that fake smile as always. "Margaret, so good to see you. The children are excited." Lie. Emma barely looked me in the eyes, and Tyler seemed confused about why Grandma didn't live there anymore. Brittany had clearly prepared them to keep their distance. But Tyler, my sweet 4-year-old Tyler, was never good at following instructions. While Emma played quietly on the tablet and Brittany pretended to be busy in the kitchen, Tyler approached me on the couch. "Grandma," he whispered, "why did you leave?" My heart broke. "Sometimes adults need to make changes, sweetheart. But you didn't want to leave, did you? Smart child. Why do you think that? Because you cried when you were packing. I saw through the window." Tears began to form in my eyes. "Tyler, you—" "Grandma," he interrupted me, looking toward the kitchen to make sure Brittany wasn't listening. "Mommy talked on the phone with Tiago yesterday." My blood froze. "Who is Tiago, sweetheart?" "I don't know, but she cried and said she misses him." Tiago. Another name I didn't know, like Julia. Tyler continued, innocently spilling information that Brittany would never imagine he was absorbing. "Mommy always talks on the phone when Daddy isn't here. She gets sad and talks to Tiago and Julia." Julia. The same name as the girl on Facebook, the same name from the letter Dolores found. Now I knew I wasn't imagining things. "And yesterday she said something strange," Tyler continued. "She said that Daddy Marcelo is angry." Daddy Marcelo. My heart was beating so hard I was sure Tyler could hear it. "Tyler," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "are you sure you heard Daddy Marcelo?" "Yes, and she said she's going to get Tiago and Julia soon, that they're going to live with us." At that moment, Brittany appeared in the living room. "Tyler, come here, sweetheart. Let Grandma rest." But Tyler, bless him, wasn't finished. "Grandma, Mommy hid a box under her and Daddy's bed. It has pictures of other children in it." Brittany went pale. "Tyler, what an imagination. Come here now." But the damage was done. Tyler had given me more clues in 5 minutes than I had managed to gather in 3 weeks. Apparently, 4-year-olds are better detectives than 62-year-olds. Julia, Tiago, Daddy Marcelo, a hidden box with photos of other children. The pieces were fitting together, and the image that was forming was terrible. Brittany cut my visit short after that. "Margaret, I think you better go. The children are getting agitated." Agitated? Tyler was just being a normal child, talking about his life. But for Brittany, every word from him was dangerous, like truth bombs exploding in her life of lies. In the car, going back to Rose's apartment, my mind was racing. Brittany had other children, children she had abandoned, and apparently a husband named Marcelo who was angry. But angry about what? "Rose," I said as soon as I arrived, "I need to go back to that house." "Margaret, you just left there." "Not to visit. To investigate. Tyler told me that Brittany hid a box under her bed, with photos of other children." Rose looked at me like I had gone crazy. "You want to break into the house?" "It's not breaking in. It's my house. Technically, I still have the right to be there." That wasn't true, but I was desperate. And sometimes, desperate people do brave things. We waited until Thursday. David was working, the children were at school, and Brittany had her regular appointment at the beauty salon on Thursday mornings. Perfect timing. Rose and I went to Maple Street. Dolores was at the window, as always, and waved when she saw us. I used my key. Brittany had never asked for it back, probably because she didn't imagine I would have the courage to use it. Big mistake. The house was silent. My house, which now seemed strange and cold. The smell was different. Brittany's expensive perfume had replaced the aroma of homemade cookies that always hung in the air. We went straight to the master bedroom. My former bedroom. Under the bed, exactly where Tyler said, there was a shoebox hidden behind some suitcases. Bingo. When I opened that box, folks, I knew my life would never be the same. Photos. Dozens of photos. A complete family I had never seen. Brittany, younger, with a dark-haired man and 2 teenagers. The girl was Julia, the same one from Facebook. The boy must have been Tiago, but it wasn't just photos. There were documents, and what I found took my breath away. An original marriage certificate. Brittany Santos and Marcelo Santos married on June 15, 2015, 4 years before she married David. Brittany was married to another man when she met my son. There were letters. Letters written by hand by children. "Mommy, when are you coming back? Daddy said you went traveling, but it's been 2 years. Julia is sad. Me too. I love you. Tiago. Mom, I know you didn't die like Daddy said. I saw you on Facebook. Please come home. Miss you, Julia." At that moment, I knew my daughter-in-law was living a gigantic lie. Brittany wasn't just an ungrateful daughter-in-law who had kicked me out of my house. She was a married woman who had abandoned 2 children to start a new life with my son. And now I had proof. But I still needed more. What I needed was for her to confess in her own words. And my sister Rose had a plan that would make Brittany tell the whole truth. Folks, if you're finding this story unbelievable, leave a comment, because what comes next will show how far a person can go to hide their secrets. You think people in their 60s don't know how to use technology for revenge? Well, let me introduce you to my sister Rose. At 58, she may not understand much, but she dominates Facebook like a teenager. Sometimes you need a social media specialist to catch a liar. When we left the house with all that evidence, Rose was furious. More furious than me, actually. "Margaret, this woman isn't just a liar. She's a criminal. Bigamy is a crime." Bigamy. I hadn't even thought of that. Brittany was married to 2 men at the same time. But how to prove it? But how are we going to prove it? I asked. She can deny everything. Say the photos are of relatives, that the documents are fake. Rose smiled. A smile I hadn't seen since we were children, and she was planning some mischief. "Margaret, you're going to give me all the information we have about this Brittany Santos. Full name, city, everything. I'm going to make her confess." "How?" "Leave it to me. Apparently, 58 years of life have taught me some things about manipulation." Rose spent the whole night on the computer. She created a fake Facebook profile with the name Sandra Martinez, using a photo of a woman in her early 30s that she found on a free photo site. She invented a complete story. Sandra was an old-school friend of Brittany's from Tucson. Perfect cover story. The trick, Rose explained to me, is to seem convincing without giving too many details. Let her fill in the gaps. People love to tell their own versions of the truth. The next morning, Rose sent a friend request to Brittany with a message. "Hi, Britt. It's me, Sandra Martinez. Remember me from Roosevelt High School? I just moved back to Arizona and saw your profile. What a coincidence. How are you? Still in touch with the school crowd?" Brittany accepted the friendship the same day. Rose had chosen well. Roosevelt High School really existed in Tucson and was big enough that it was plausible that 2 people knew each other vaguely. Hook, line, and sinker. The conversation started innocently. Rose asked general questions about life, work, family. Brittany responded enthusiastically, clearly happy to reconnect with an old friend. Little did she know she was talking to the sister of the woman she had kicked out of her house. But then Rose started to press. "Britt, are you still with that boyfriend from school? What was his name? Marcelo?" Brittany took a while to respond. When she did, she was evasive. "Oh, that was a long time ago, Sandra. A lot has changed." Rose insisted. "Of course. I imagine you guys have kids now, right? I remember you always wanted a big family." Another long pause. Then, "It's complicated, Sandra. I prefer not to talk about it." But Rose didn't give up. Apparently, she had inherited the family stubbornness. For 3 days, she kept planting seeds, asking apparently innocent questions that made Brittany increasingly uncomfortable. "Do you still live in Tucson? Or did you come back to Arizona? How are your kids? They must be big now. And Marcelo? Are you guys still together?" On the 3rd day, Brittany broke. It was in a video conversation that Rose managed to start. Brittany, thinking she was talking to a trusted old friend, opened up. And Rose was recording everything. "Sandra, can I trust you?" "Of course, Britt. We've been friends since school." And then Brittany told everything. "I made some mistakes in the past. I married Marcelo very young. We had 2 children. But I wasn't ready to be a mother. I was too young, too immature." Rose made understanding sounds, encouraging Brittany to continue. What came next was even worse. I left. I left them in Tucson and came to Phoenix. I met David, fell in love for real for the first time. I built a new life. "And Marcelo? Does he know where you are?" "No. I changed my last name back to my maiden name when I moved. He thinks I died in a car accident. It was the only way to start over." Rose was recording everything. Every word. Every confession of abandonment and lies. "And your children?" Brittany started crying. "Julia and Tiago. They were 12 and 10 when I left. Now they're 16 and 14. I miss them every day, Sandra. But I can't go back. I built a life here. I have other children now, Emma and Tyler. David doesn't know anything. Britt, this is complicated. Understatement of the century. I know, and now it's getting worse. David's mother-in-law was living with us, and she was starting to ask questions. Too curious woman. I had to find a way to get her out of the house." "How so?" "I convinced David that she was interfering with our marriage, that we needed privacy. She left last month." Rose's heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice calm. "And now? Now I need to sell the house and move us. Far away. Maybe to another state. Marcelo is starting to look for me again. He hired a private detective. And my children. Julia found me on Facebook. She knows I'm alive. Are you going back to them?" "I can't. If I go back, I lose David and the children here. If I stay, Marcelo can find me and destroy everything. The only way out is to disappear again. Start from scratch somewhere else." Rose pretended understanding, but inside, she was boiling with rage. Apparently, Brittany thought she could keep abandoning families forever. "And the house? You said you're going to sell it?" "I'm already working on it. The house is in the mother-in-law's name, but I got a power of attorney. I'm going to sell it quickly, take the money, and convince David to move. He won't suspect anything." Power of attorney. Brittany had forged a power of attorney to sell my house. The house I paid for 20 years was being stolen with fake documents. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Brittany confessing details about how she had manipulated David, how she planned to use the money from the sale to escape, how she intended to cut all ties with the past. "Sandra, you're not going to tell anyone, are you? I trust you." "Of course not, Britt. Your secrets are safe with me." What a lie. But sometimes you need to lie to catch a liar. When the call ended, Rose and I looked at each other in silence. "Margaret," Rose said finally, "we got her." Now I had proof. Physical documents, photos, and a 40-minute recorded confession. It was time to confront the liar. But first, I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to think she had won. Because the fall would be much more painful when she discovered she had confessed everything to the family of the woman she kicked out of her house. What Brittany didn't know was that her old school friend was about to become her worst nightmare. You know that feeling when you know you have all the cards in your hand, but you still need to play the game to the end? That's exactly how I felt when I called Brittany. "Brittany," I said, making my voice sound defeated. "Can we talk? I accept the situation. I just want to make peace before I move permanently to another state." There was a pause. Brittany clearly didn't expect this. Apparently, she thought I was completely broken. "Margaret, are you okay?" "I'm tired of fighting, dear. Rose found a senior apartment in Nevada. I'm moving next week. I just wanted, I don't know, maybe have coffee and talk like 2 adult women." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Of course, Margaret. That would be good. Perfect." She was swallowing the bait like a hungry fish. We arranged to meet the next day at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, a public place with movement where she would feel safe to talk. Rose helped me prepare everything. Small recorder hidden in my purse, phone set to record too, and all the evidence organized in a folder that would stay in the car. Game time. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Brittany was already there. She looked different, more relaxed, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was even wearing a new dress, probably bought with the money she planned to steal from selling my house. "Margaret," she said, even hugging me, "you look better." "I'm at peace with the decision," I lied. "Sometimes changes are necessary." We ordered our coffees and sat at a corner table. Brittany was visibly relieved. Little did she know she was about to dig her own grave. "You know, Margaret, I always respected you. I know it didn't seem like it, but—" "Brittany," I interrupted her, "can I ask a question? Woman to woman?" "Sure. How did you manage to convince David that I wanted to leave my own house?" She smiled, a smile that gave me chills. Apparently, she was proud of her own manipulation. "It wasn't hard. David has always been malleable. He hates conflicts. When I said you were interfering with our marriage, that the children were confused with two mother figures in the house, he accepted it right away. And the power of attorney? How did you get it?" Brittany stopped smiling. "What power of attorney?" "The one you used to put the house in your name." Her face went white. "Margaret, I don't know what you're talking about." "Brittany, dear," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I know everything." "Know what?" "About Marcelo, about Julia and Tiago, about the fact that you're married to two men at the same time." If she was white before, now she was transparent. Her hands started shaking. I don't... About the private detective that Marcelo hired. About your children looking for you on Facebook. About you planning to sell my house to run away again." Brittany started trembling. "How did you... Who told you this?" "You did, dear. To your old school friend, Sandra Martinez." The recognition appeared in her eyes like lightning. That wasn't... My sister Rose. Very smart for a 58-year-old woman, don't you think? Apparently you two have a lot in common. You're both great actresses." Brittany stood up abruptly, spilling the coffee. "I need to go." "Sit down, Brittany. Or do you prefer I call you Brittany Santos, wife of Marcelo Santos, mother of Julia and Tiago Santos?" She sat down slowly, as if her legs couldn't support her weight anymore. "Game over." "What do you want?" she whispered. "The truth. All of it. And I want David to know who he really married." "Margaret, please. I can explain." "Then explain. Explain how you abandoned two children. Explain how you forged documents to marry my son. Explain how you kicked me out of the house I paid for 20 years so you could sell it and run away again." And then, folks, something happened that I didn't expect. Brittany collapsed. It wasn't a calculated confession. It was a complete breakdown. She started crying, talking nonstop, as if years of lies were finally coming out. "I was very young when I married Marcelo. 17 years old, I got pregnant right away, had Julia, then Tiago. But I wasn't ready. I felt trapped, suffocated. Marcelo was controlling, possessive. So you ran away." "I left. I didn't run away, I left. I left a letter saying I couldn't do it anymore, that they would be better off without me. And you faked your own death. That was later. When Marcelo started looking for me, hiring detectives, I just wanted peace. I wanted to start over." "And my son? Didn't David deserve to know the truth?" "I was going to tell him. I swear I was. But the more time passed, the harder it got. And then Emma was born, then Tyler. I had a family again, a family that loved me. You had a family that loved you in Tucson, too. It wasn't the same thing. With David, it's different. He makes me feel complete." "And my grandchildren? Emma and Tyler? Were you going to take them away from their father, too?" Apparently, Brittany thought she could keep destroying families forever. "No, I never. I just wanted us to move, start over somewhere else, all together. With the money from selling my house." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The guilt was written all over her face. "Brittany," I said, "you destroyed two families, yours in Tucson and mine here, and you were ready to destroy a third. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but you did. You hurt your children in Tucson, who grew up thinking their mother was dead. You hurt David, who married a lie. You hurt my grandchildren, who lost their grandmother. And you hurt me, taking me away from the house I paid for 20 years. Brittany was sobbing now. What are you going to do? What I should have done a long time ago. Tell the truth. Margaret, please. Think about the children. Emma and Tyler aren't to blame for anything. You should have thought about that before. I got up from the table, leaving Brittany crying in the coffee shop. But I still had one last card up my sleeve, and David was about to discover who he had really married. What happened next would make Brittany realize that her lies had finally come to an end. Folks, if you're on the edge of your seats, leave a like, because what comes now is the justice we've all been waiting for. You know what the hardest part of exposing a lie is? It's not gathering the evidence. It's not confronting the liar. It's telling the truth to someone you love and watching their world fall apart. David was at work when I called. Mom, is everything okay? You sound strange. David, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Can you come to Rose's house now? Mom, I'm in the middle of an installation. David, I said, and something in my tone must have alerted him. It's about Brittany. And it's very serious. He arrived an hour later, clearly nervous. Rose had prepared coffee and organized all the evidence on the living room table. Photos, documents, burned fragments, everything arranged like evidence in a courtroom. Mom, what's going on? Brittany called crying, said you two fought. David, sit down. What I'm going to tell you will be hard to hear. I started from the beginning. Julia's photo on Facebook, the burned papers that Dolores found, the hidden box under the bed, the recorded conversation with Sandra Martinez. With each revelation, I saw my son shrinking more in his chair. His hands trembled as he held the photos of Brittany's first family. Mom, this can't be right. Brittany wouldn't do this. David, Rose said gently, we want you to hear the recording. We played the audio of Brittany's confession. 40 minutes of her admitting everything. The first marriage, the abandoned children, the false identity, the plans to sell the house I paid for 20 years and run away. When it was over, David was in complete silence, just looking at his hands. Silent tears ran down his face. 5 years, he whispered. 5 years married to a lie. David, Emma, and Tyler. They have half-siblings they don't even know exist, and I kicked my own mother out of her house because of a criminal. You didn't know. I should have suspected. Brittany never talked about her family, never had old photos, always changed the subject when I asked about the past. David stood up abruptly. Where is she now? Probably at home. David, what are you going to do? What I should have done a long time ago, protect my family, my real family. We all went to Maple Street. Brittany was there packing. When she saw us come in, she stopped and faced us like a cornered animal. David, I can explain. No, David said, and his voice was firmer than I had heard in years. There's no explanation for this, Brittany, or should I call you Mrs. Santos? David, please. 5 years, 5 years of lies. You made me kick my own mother out of the house she paid for 20 years. I love you and the children. If you loved us, you would have told the truth. If you loved your other children, you wouldn't have abandoned them. David turned to me. Mom, this is your house. It always was. Brittany, you have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. And the children? The children stay with me. You lost the right to be their mother the moment you decided to be a fugitive. Brittany tried to argue, beg, negotiate. But David was unwavering. In 2 hours, she had left our lives, forever. But the story doesn't end there, folks. David contacted Marcelo in Tucson. The conversation was difficult, but necessary. Marcelo cried when he learned that Brittany was alive. Julia and Tiago cried even more. 3 months later, Julia and Tiago came to visit us in Phoenix. It was strange at first. Emma and Tyler didn't understand why they had older siblings who appeared out of nowhere. But children adapt quickly. Apparently, they're better than adults at accepting the truth. Julia, now 17, is an incredible girl. Intelligent, strong, with a maturity that comes from growing up without a mother. Tiago, 15, is quiet but sweet, and immediately fell in love with his younger siblings. Brittany was prosecuted for bigamy, document forgery, and child abandonment. She's serving time in an Arizona prison. She lost custody of Emma and Tyler, and Marcelo doesn't allow her to see Julia and Tiago. David is in therapy, dealing with the betrayal and learning to trust again. He asked me for forgiveness 1,000 times, but I had already forgiven him. He was as much a victim as I was. And me? I'm back in my house on Maple Street, the house I paid for 20 years, the house I almost lost to a liar. Sometimes, folks, life teaches us that we should trust our instincts. If something seems wrong, it probably is. And never underestimate the power of a determined mother-in-law and a gossipy neighbor. Today, when I look out my living room window, I see Emma and Tyler playing in the backyard with Julia and Tiago. 4 children who almost lost each other because of one woman's lies. But the truth always comes out. Always. And Dolores? She's still at the window, watching the street. Because thank God for neighbors like her. Sometimes you need a professional gossip to save your family. Remember, folks, your home is your castle. And if someone tries to take away from you something you paid for 20 years, fight, because the truth always wins in the end. If this story touched you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you know someone who's going through a similar situation, share it. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone. Thank you for listening to me, dear ones. Until the next story, remember, real family never abandons real family.